year. Now we're on the date of the 18th of Nisan. Naturally, we call that Yud Chet Nisan in Hebrew. It marks the Hilul of a famous Bosnian origin rabbi who would go on to become a great rabbi in Jerusalem, respectively. His name was Rav Sasson Bachar Moshe. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I believe we've spoken about him on various occasions before here inside this series. It happens to be here on Yud Chet Nisan. He's the Hilul of the great rabbi. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the great rabbi's life, because there's much that we can actually relate over within regards to him. Now, he was actually born back in more the early part of the 1800s, respectively. To be precise, he was born in English year 1825, and he passed away in the year 1903. I believe it was 15th of April of that year. So we're talking 1903. So we're talking about 122 years here from time of recording. Here in the year 2025, he was one of the great rabbis of his time. He was a rabbi of Bosnian origin. He's a rabbi, obviously, we've spoken about on various occasions before. He was known as Priki Ado. I think it was named Precious in Ladino. He would become a rabbi in Jerusalem. He would become a leader of the Bet El, a Kabbalistic community, Bet El Yeshiva, a place we've spoken about on various occasions before. And he was author of a Torah book series called Shem Sasson, which is a commentary, I believe, on the books of Rabbi Chaim Vital. Now, he was born in an area in Bosnia called, I believe, Orjok, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very interesting enough, I think at that point in time, it was part of the Ottoman Empire, and he was actually reported over to have been born from a family that attributed itself to Rabbi Yosef Karo. It's reported over Rabbi Yosef Karo, one of the great rabbis of Jewish history, the author of the Code of Jewish Law, let's say the Shulchan Aruch, respectively. And when he was at a very, very young age, I think about 5 years of age, we're talking about in the year 1830, it was his family, he would actually move with his family to Eretz Yisrael at that point in time. And obviously that was a brilliant feat. And it's actually interesting. I think also his brother, at a point later, Ephraim Bachar Moshe, who was then, I think, 15 years old, would also immigrate and would later on, I think, become a Rosh Yeshiva and a Dayan in Israel, in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. So that's very interesting extra feedback. Tidbit, actually, to be aware of with regards to his family. So I think he himself, if I'm not mistaken, passed away at 62 years of age on the 5th of January in 1882, but that's something separate. Now in Jerusalem, he would learn under great rabbis, including the famous Rabbi Vidal Kohanika, another great rabbi we've spoken about on various occasions before. He was a great Kabbalist of his time. He was one of the famous rabbis of the Yeshivat Bet El period, and become the Rosh Midrash HaChasidim Chesed El, and the author of the Sifrei Kabbalah book, interesting enough. So that was his rabbi, very, very great rabbi. And I think we actually spoke about him in a separate video at one stage in time. I think he was the author of the Chok Chaim, if I'm not mistaken. Now, another one of the rabbis who would actually learn under auspices of was Rabbi David Chayet, I believe. Who happened to be another very great rabbi of his time. And I think in collaboration with his brother, he would print in Jerusalem a number of Kabbalah books by Kabbalists who preceded them, I think, at that stage in time. Now, I think it was around the year 1882, he was about 57 years of age, he would be appointed the Rosh Yeshiva of the famous Yeshivat Bet El, a very prominent position over there. And this was a position, I believe, he would keep until he passed away on the 15th of April in the year 1903, making him, I think, one of the longest serving Rosh Yeshivat of the Yeshivat Bet El, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll have to maybe look at a specific chart within regards to the history of that yeshiva, which I recommend everyone to do. Now, I think during this time period where he had the premiership position in this amazing yeshiva, he would actually make various different traveling, including he would travel to Iraq and also to India as a Shukhay Darabanan, Shadar, as we say it. Now, I believe he passed away, as we said before, in 1903, and will be buried in Har HaZeitin, the Mount of Olives burial plot in Jerusalem. This was, I think in the Magyarim section of the plot of the area in of itself. Now, he had great Talmudim also, which we have to point out. Included among his Talmudim was a famous Rabbi Shalom Hodaya, another rabbi spoken about on various occasions before On this series, we've had the privilege of speaking about him. He himself happened to be head of Jewish court of the Sephardi community in Jerusalem, Rosh Yeshiva, also of, I believe, the Bet El Yeshiva, and one of the great rabbis of Ram Sava. That was one of his students. Another one of his Talmidim was the famous Rav Moshe Idan, who would become a Dayan and a Kabbalist. Also, once again, the great rabbis of Jerb and Jabs in Tunisia, respectively, and also was, I believe, a head Mekubal in his land, respectively, in Tunisia. Now, he left us with a lot of great works. Now, especially his most famous writing, let's just say, I think, was especially published, I think, in 4 volumes and had 11 sections, including commentary that encompasses various different teachings of famous Arizal, who we've spoken about on various occasions before. Okay, Chelek Aleph was on the Etz Chaim book. I think that was actually on the book of Chaim Vital, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the second section of the book, we're looking at various different introductions, let's just say, and rules, and there was collections of Midrashim and various other important Torah issues in of itself, the Chelek Bet did. And I think there was also very different shvot with regards to the inyan of Shemitah. Then the Chelek Gimel, the third part, was on the Sha'ar HaKabanot and Ptach Enaim, respectively. Chelek Dal, the fourth part, was on the Sidur Rashash, the famous Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, I believe, his Sidur, which he had, and a Perush on Pri Etz Chaim. Very interesting. Then Chelek Hey would be on the Sha'ar Mamrei Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Chelek Vav, the sixth part, would be on the Sha'ar Mamrei Radal. And the Chelek Zayin will be on the Sha'ar HaMitzvot, the gates of the mitzvot, respectively, we can say. Chelek Chet was on the Sha'ar Psukim. Chelek Tet, which was the 9th section, on the Sefer Halikutim. Chelek Yud will be on Halkdamat Rechovot HaNahar. Interesting enough, Chelek Yud Aleph, the 12th, let's just say 11th part of the book, was on the Sha'ar HaGilgulim, which is a great book in of itself, which I recommend everyone to look into. And I think it was actually from Rav Chaim Vital. We mentioned at the onset that many of his workings and teachings, which he learned, would have been from Rabbi Chaim Vital, the famous Kabbalist that would live about a few hundred years before him, which is... we have to point out also very, very interesting enough. Now, he, on addition to these, let's say, series of books, there was a booklet in his handwriting was found. I think there was copies of Kabbalah books with his comments actually featured on it. I think 48 of his responses on Kabbalah matters and questions will appear in a response with regards to Tehillim, and from various different sages also. Manuscript, I think this specific manuscript was written in his youth, and glosses were added to it, I think, in his later years. Now, I think that would eventually be printed, if I'm not mistaken, in the Hebrew Taf Shin Ayin Hey. Now, he was one of the great Bosnian rabbis of his time. As we said before, he was buried in Har Hazeitim, the Mount of Olives burial plot. Passed away 15th of April, 1903, 122 years ago. He was a Talmid of Rabbi Vidal Koenika. He produced various great rabbis of his time. And I would recommend everyone to learn more with regards to history of Bosnian Jewry, Jerusalem Jewry, especially at that point in time in 1800s, 1900s. And don't forget to light candles in his memory here on the 18th of Nisan. Now, friends, we're a community here. We're learning about the great Oriental rabbis of yesteryear. Now, in this series, we've covered nearly about 900 great Chachamim. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please subscribe now. If you happen to be related or descend from any of the great Chachamim we're speaking about, please send me a comment. I would love to hear more. And don't forget to share the videos to other people that might be interested in watching these videos. Wishing all Moadim L'Simcha, a Chag Sameach. I'm recording this here on the third night of Passover here in the city of Ramat Gan in Israel.